We have our panel now that Dan Chenok will be facilitating, and Dan will run through the panel, and then we have 3 panel members. Please come on over. Stephen Rodriguez, Andy Malay. Who's Gary? Oh, there you go. Okay, sorry. And Gary Lambert, who made the trip down from Connecticut here. So, Dan.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I hope you've had a terrific set of sessions on technologies, and we're going to try to sort of wrap this up with a very interactive discussion, both with the panel, with you here in the room, and with folks who are on the webinar. I'm Dan Chenok. I run the IBM Center for the Business of Government. We're very pleased to be one of the partners for today's session with Public Spend Forum. For those of you that aren't familiar, the IBM Center is essentially a research organization, sort of a think tank within IBM that focuses on government improvement issues, both here and around the world. And we have written a lot on procurement issues in various different forms, acquisition issues. And so this is a topic that when Raj told us about the conference, we were very happy to help partner on it. I have the benefit of serving with a terrific panel of leaders for this discussion. I'll just introduce them real quickly, and then we'll get into the session. Gary Lambert, who is the Assistant Secretary for Operational Services for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Thanks for joining, Gary. Andy Malay. Andy is the head of public sector for Coupa, which deploys procurement technology to drive value, a company that's doing very interesting work in this space. And then Steve Rodriguez, who is the founder of One Defense, which is a venture capital a firm that's helping to bring new firms into the defense space. Obviously, new firms in that space have a lot of procurement discussions that they go through as they come into government. So 3 leaders who can help us move through this. What we want to do is really have this be a discussion among all of us in the room based on what you've heard over the last several hours. So I'm actually going to ask you first to do something yourselves, both in the room and on the webinar. And that is to write down, we're going to do a little mini 1-minute design thinking session here. Take a minute and write down what your idea for the biggest challenge to finding the best suppliers or technology, if you're the government, sort of how do you find the best suppliers or technology to make things work? Or if you're a seller, what are the best technologies to sell to the government, especially when you think you may have the best solution? Sort of how do you make that match? And for those of you that are on the webinar, feel free to use the chat to draw this in. And we're going to come back to this thought. So I'm going to start the Jeopardy music now while you're writing. And we'll just give this a minute to write that down. Okay, so while they're finishing up, if I could ask the panel, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience real quick, to do a little speed question, just to start us off with a little calisthenics. When you think of the term government market, what is a single word or phrase you think of, and why does that phrase come to mind? So, Gary, you want to start?
Sure. I think the word that comes to mind quickly is complexity. And the reason why that comes to mind is there's a myriad of contracting terms, regulations, policies. They vary depending on the type of spend category, and also the complexity for the various size and diversity of the business community that we work with, our customer base. Not everyone's sophisticated enough to have a staff attorney to review all of the contracting language and the bidding documents and those kinds of things. Some firms are more aware of multiple states and their approaches and their culture. And it makes it hard for new businesses to understand the market when they're trying to figure out how to get new contracts with government, even through a competitive bidding process, because it's different from the commercial space. Or if you're small or diverse, it's not something you're used to, or you don't have the resources to invest tons of time going through and building responses, whether it's at midnight through the electronic tools or whether it's during your normal business day.
Thanks. Andy?
Yeah, some of what I'm going to say echoes what Gary just said. Being in this business for a long time and responding to procurements from the government marketplace, there's always the issue around just the length of the procurement, the processes and policies that go on there. So, and I look at companies that try to enter the marketplace, and I think, frankly, a lot of them are very naive. They don't understand what they're getting themselves into, to be honest with you. And if I were to suggest anything would change, it would be that those things are things that need to be changed. They need to be looked at, because I understand there's mandates, there's policies, there's laws that have to be in place for state and local governments as well as the federal government. But there is a better way to do procurement, and if we can somehow figure out how to reduce the burden of those policies and procedures for procurement, it would definitely help out everybody involved.
Great. Steve?
So I'd probably phrase it in terms of time, business economics, and risk. Time, for the reasons that you guys already said. The issue with most companies, whether they're venture backed or not, isn't being told no. It's just the time it takes to be told no. The standard federal procurement timeline is 12 to 18 months, right? So I'm coming at it from a federal perspective, but 12 to 18 months. Guess how long Moore's law is, right? Moore's law says technology doubles every 12. It used to be 18 months. Now there's clear evidence that timeline is actually sliding forwards. So that's a problem. Business economics, again, it's a when you have constraints on profit margin, the focus is on margin rather than revenue. That's a problem. And then, of course, lastly, I think for the topics you discussed, risk to the government. Obviously, people typically aren't rewarded if things go extremely well, but they're certainly punished if things don't at a macro and a micro level. But also for the business itself. I mean, look, if you're a venture-backed company, you typically raise money on runways, right? Like over 12, 18, 24 months. So I know a number of VCs, not just in Silicon Valley, that will fire the CEO if they find out that they're doing business with any kind of government without coordinating with them first, because they say, look, you are burning through my money. So it would be great if we knew ahead of time. Let's make sure it's a good target to take a shot on goal, because you only have so much time.
So VCs see government market not necessarily with a positive adjective.
They do, but let me offer one caveat, and this is great news. From my experience, when I was stupid enough to found my own company, and when I did, originally I was saying, well, how am I going to get all my friends, in the venture capital world engaged? How am I going to get the major accelerators, Techstars, 500 Startups, Stanford StartX, Y Combinator? How am I going to get all these folks engaged? I can never pay them enough to make it worth their while. And then that was actually the answer. You do not define the relationship in terms of money. What I found out was, maybe it's because they're patriots. Maybe also because these companies, and especially the VCs that back them, have a huge appetite for big problems, right? When Google submitted their DARPA SBIR award, Section 6 within an SBIR award, at least with DARPA, is your commercialization strategy, where you have to say, hey, with the government funding I got, what am I going to do with said government funding in the commercial world? They said, hey, why don't we, organize the world's information and make it searchable? If you Google now, yes, Google, guess what their mission is? We organize the world's information and make it searchable. So please don't, I guess the good news, and I'll shut up, please don't be put off by either the capital they have or the mystique, because it's really not that cool, and you actually have more money than they do. But really give them big problems. Don't give them a BS mission. Give them big problems, and I think you'll be surprised as how they figure out. I mean, look, they'll figure out how to make money. You don't have to spell it out for them. If they're talking to you, they probably have a good idea.
So anybody in the audience want to share a thought about the government market, just to kind of get the conversation going? Or Raj, I don't know who's reading the chat, if there's anybody monitoring that. See if anything came in. All the way in the back?
Hey, I'm going to sit down and read this. Just a couple of these are sort of long, but one public sector view is basically finding software that doesn't have to be completely customized to our needs and will still be usable with systems that come out in the future. They have software that they currently use that can be run on like a Windows XP virtual system. So I guess what's the scalability and ultimately integration into new procurements and technologies that come out?
Mm-hmm. Any other observations? Any reactions to the comment from our commentator in the back? Go ahead, Gary.
So this is Gary. My reaction to that really is at the state level, most governments are in a cloud-first mentality right now. So scalability shouldn't be an issue if you're in a cloud-first mentality. If you look at it from an e-procurement technology system, it's pretty rare if you're moving forward or thinking forward that you're going to look for some legacy system on a box in your organization. It's not really the right way to go. It's not really the feasible way to move the organization forward, right? It's more about configurability now as opposed to customization.
Yeah, so I just want to chime in on that one. So as Gary said, what we're seeing more and more is a move to the cloud, and in particular with a SaaS model, software as a service. And in fact, representing Coupa software, and in fact, I know there's other vendors that provide very similar systems too. We operate in the cloud in a multi-tenant environment where virtually every customer, not virtually, every customer uses the same exact version of the software. And the reason for that is because you eliminate a lot of the problems that are associated with new releases. We do not allow any customization, but the system is highly configurable. So you can configure the system to your own usage, and then when the next release comes out, it gets rolled out online through the cloud, and it's up and running in a matter of minutes as opposed to customization that might have taken days, months, years, whatever, and have to redo that again when a new version comes out. So I think part of it is the ability to have technology change rapidly, new changes come in, enhancements to the system, and you'll be able to take the benefits of those because it does come through a SaaS environment. If you have customization, it creates additional problems.
So Andy, I know you've been thinking through, and I know, are we okay for Andy for you to talk a little further?
Raj, do we have slides or not?
Sorry, they didn't work.
Okay. So Andy, without the benefit
Sure.
of the visuals, I know you've been thinking about these challenges in a little more detail. Can you kind of walk our
So I had this great
audience
slide
through?
presentation. I'll hold it up.
Okay.
We'll share it with them.
No, actually, thank you.
Yep.
So as one of the sponsors here, Raj gave me the opportunity to do a slide presentation, and I had some really great slides that you guys are really going to miss. So, but I do want to make some general comments just about the marketplace and the availability of the tools that are in place today, and to put in perspective of what we do without being salesy. So Raj also told me that I'm not allowed to do any type of sales pitch. So asking a sales guy to not be salesy, it's kind of like me putting a bowl of food in front of my dog and asking him not to eat. It's a little tough. But I promise I will try not to do that. But listening to the previous panel, I was making notes back there, and also of all the presenters today, there seems to be a lot of common themes. And one of the things that we have seen, and so this is very real. In fact, the last 3 RFPs we got from government entities, I won't say who they are, one said that they were looking for, quote, an at-home experience. Another one said they wanted an Amazon-like experience. And another one said they wanted a TurboTax-like experience. However, each one of those RFPs had hundreds, if not thousands, of specific feature functionality requirements that they wanted us to respond to. So there's a little bit of a conflict there. I mean, what are you really asking for? I think on the surface, people are saying we want a modern solution, but at the end of the day, it's sort of give me what we do today, but modernize it. And that's a problem. So when I would flip to my next slide, one of the things I was going to talk about was just the problems that we have in this industry. And the problems that the people in this audience and those who are online face that are part of a procurement organization is that it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you can't get that solution that you're looking for because you're saddled with policies and procurements and procurement policies and mandates and laws and regulations, and the mentality that, hey, it's what we've done for the last 35, 40, 50 years or whatever it is, that you have to stick to that. So what I would ask you to do is to start thinking more about the realm of the possible. In fact, I've had a couple of meetings just in the last couple of days here with government organizations. And when we talked about the realm of the possible, meaning what is available today, the response was, geez, I didn't know that systems out there could do that. So what I would actually just, be a little more flexible and realize that there are systems out there. So Coupa software, we've really kind of cut our teeth in the commercial marketplace. I'm not going to go through all the details, but look at the Fortune 100 companies that utilize us. Look at what the industry analysts say about us, what Gartner, what IDC and Forrester say about us. And it's not so much that, it's not really the tool itself. It's the value that the tool brings to organizations. So that's the mindset too. It's not so much, tell me about the feature functionality. It's really, at the end of the day, what is the value that your system brings to my organization? And that value can come from a lot of different areas. So one of the things that Raj asked me to talk about was market intelligence, for instance. And I looked at it and said, there's really three key components to crafting what I would consider a tool that brings you value related to market intelligence. And the first one is visibility and reporting. If you have your spend under management and you have the ability to actually see exactly where your dollars are going and how they're spent, and the trends, the industry trends as well as your own internal trends, and if you have that presented to you in a real-time fashion, that's part of it. The second part of it is contractor or your contractors, your suppliers, your vendors, the management of those people that are providing you those products and services. When I say management of that, it's really, where's my money going? How's it being spent? Am I getting value for it? And oh, by the way, how are those suppliers doing? For instance, one of the things that we provide is what I'll call sort of like a Yelp type experience with our vendor management system, is the ability to actually see how they're performing. And that's just part of the equation. The other aspect of it then is collaboration. You've really got to work internally within your organization. It's shocking and surprising in some ways how disconnected that we've learned that government procurement organizations are from, say, accounts payable or the finance office, that they really act like separate entities that just somehow have to be integrated. So what we're saying is that if you combine visibility, if you combine contractor and supplier management, and you combine collaboration internally, it gives you the foundation to really do effective market intelligence. It's not just so much who's out there and what they're providing, it's how are they providing it? How do we utilize their services and products? Are we getting the biggest bang for our buck? And that's the value aspect of it. Some of the things that are related to that I wanted to talk about, and so you say, how do you get to that point? How do you really get to the maximum value for a system? User adoption is critical. So we go back to that comment about the at-home experience or the Amazon type experience. One of the things, and we say this tongue in cheek, by the way, is that a lot of times I'll be in a presentation and we'll ask people, who in the audience uses Amazon.com, and everybody will raise their hand. The next question is, how many people got trained to use Amazon.com? No hands go up, of course. And that's the model that we're trying to facilitate here, is that the intuitive, easy to use system. In fact, the kind of the tongue-in-cheek follow-up we have to that is that the world buys through Amazon, but Amazon buys through Coupa because they actually use Coupa for their own internal procurement. And I'm not suggesting that we have a better solution, but maybe we do. But anyway, it's that point of, again, value to you. It's ease of use. It's getting the value out that you want. It's be able to track that too. It's to have the analytics associated with your procurement, to be able to see where your dollars are going, how they're being spent, and how efficiently they're being spent. So with that, like I said, I really had some great slides to talk about this, and I promised Rajay would be short. But in summary, at the end of the day, a tool is a tool. Software product's a software product, and you could come up here with all the other product providers, and they would tell you that they have the best tool. And frankly, there are really great tools out there, and I'm not going to pick sides one way or the other. It's really at the end of the day, it's how quickly can you use them, how quickly do you get value out of them, and how really do you utilize that value internally. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Any from our panel, any sort of responses to the challenges and opportunities that Andy laid out?
Sure. Dad. Can you hear me? Yeah. Cool. So, what the intuitive nature of what he was describing is critical, but maybe not for the way you're thinking. From a commercial side, so my first foray out of government was a company I ended up running, a venture-backed company that gave kind of high-end, almost Palantir-like data insights to the U.S. government, specifically to multiple U.S. intelligence agencies and the Department of Defense. Cool. One big problem. So we had a really proprietary high-level model. It allowed you to do short-term political risk predictions going into the future, and it actually worked. Here was one problem. We were a software as a service solution, but our model, not unlike Palantir's, was not either intuitive nor was it easy for our customers to use on their own. So typically our dialogue, and maybe you guys have been there too, our dialogue went something like this. Hey, here's what we do. Cool, like we'll buy it. Great. Well, I tell you what, in addition to the licenses, can we also give you a very nice services contract, right? So you can actually use your tool for us to generate the insights that you say you can. And of course, when you're a cash-hungry young company, the answer is absolutely, we'd love to. That's a lot of money. Well, it is, except for the fact that you're no longer a software as a service company. You're now a service as a software company, and your margins get shattered. And we went from like 75% margin to 25% margin or less. And that's a problem. That's a problem because if you go out and engage those companies with that mindset, right, with the idea that, look, like I'm busy, I've got a lot on my plate, I'm trying to factor in all these other cool technologies you've learned about today, and I got this dude or dudette who comes in and is pitching me on this thing, and I really like it, but I don't know how I have the bandwidth to incorporate it. Well, then I think that's something we're engaging with industry, both your existing industrial base that supports you at the state, federal, or local level, as well as engaging the commercial industry to help walk them through in a dialogue what they could develop that would allow you as the user, as the customer, to actually use it. Because I can't underestimate the intuitive nature of software applications enough. I mean, TurboTax and AWS, or sorry, not AWS, Amazon, yeah, they just work. You just get on there, and my son's already trying to order things, and he's 24 months, so it works too well. So yeah, that would be a quick rejoinder to what you just said.
Great. Anything else, Gary?
I think as good as all the tools are, the challenge, if you are outward facing, so to the business community, is really catalog content creation in a way. So right, Amazon and so on and so forth. But how in the environment that we work in and work with the business community, do you actually impart the right wisdom to the business community to establish the right content that can be searchable, findable, and usable in the process of acquisition or in the process of notification, even before you have a contract, the process of proper notification or appropriate notification of opportunities, which if you leave people to their devices, I don't care if you're using NAICS code, I don't care if you're using UNSPSC, I don't care if you're using any other code set, most folks that are on the other side of that, hunting for business, have no clue. Mm-hmm. More often than not, we find they pick the wrong codes. Then they continue to miss the opportunity that the technology provides them from a push perspective to receive that opportunity to make a business decision about whether or not they want to take on that opportunity, that risk, whatever sort of measures they're using to make decisions, and actually participate. And it can quickly create frustration for new vendors in particular, new businesses that are looking for opportunity, and frustrate them to the point where they go, I'm not coming back and doing this again. So all of the effort that we would put in from the government side to attract new business gets eaten up pretty quickly because we didn't spend the right amount of time, or it wasn't intuitive enough on the business side for folks to figure out the right way to get value quickly. And it's a fickle world with the business community, particularly when the economy's humming for government, to attract new business. Historically, what you see the trend to be is as the economy goes soft in the commercial world, more and more companies are attracted to government opportunities to make up for that other lost revenue. When the economy's strong, there's a little bit more hesitation given resources or the inability to get resources these days to make that investment, to go to Stephen's point about sort of time and the value of money in time to get a government contract, particularly if they're smaller, particularly if they're incremental and they're not sort of that $50 million deal with subs and whatnot.
So think back to your exercise we did a few minutes back around biggest challenge. In light of the discussion, anything that anybody in the audience wants to share? Yeah, up here.
Can people hear me?
There's a mic coming up. And just introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Joe Sandor with Michigan State, and I want to follow up on Andy's comment around value, and I'd like to challenge conventional wisdom to a certain extent. I've heard multiple times from most every panelist that the objective is to increase competition, to find new vendors. I'm going to suggest that the objective ought to be to reduce total cost of ownership and enhance innovation, which sometimes results from finding new vendors and sometimes doesn't. I think we confuse the goal, and in the process, we suboptimize the results. I know there's a big gap between private and public sector, but nobody in the private sector would say their goal is to increase competition. This just wouldn't come up. And I think if you look back to Deming, our job is to essentially provide goods and services at the lowest possible cost, which means typically using incumbents and developing suppliers and having long tenured relationships. Simon Nagata spoke to my class. He's the president of Toyota. The job he had before that was the chief procurement officer. And a student asked a question about bidding. He said, the only time you should ever bid is when you don't know cost. And he paused and said, you should never not know cost. So my question becomes, how do we move beyond an interim metric, like increasing the number of bidders, to an actual metric of value, which is reduced total cost or increased innovation? And,
and value across the acquisition lifecycle is what I'm hearing, in both
precisely.
in
That's
selection
TCO.
as well as in delivery. Yep.
Precisely. Raj wants to.
I just want to add to that, and this is, by the way, Professor Joe Sandor from Michigan State University, if you didn't figure it out yet. So what I was going to add was that, just a counterpoint to that, and I want to turn it back over, is that, how the issue is not necessarily about competition itself, but are we getting effective competition, right? It's are we getting the best? It goes back to TCO. Do you have the best suppliers? Can you find them? Will they come work with government? And the question back to everyone, and the comment back is, how does technology also help that, right? And I think that's fundamentally one of the things that we're trying to uncover is, how does technology and these solutions that we're talking about, how does that help you get to more effective competition, not just let's attract more numbers, to your point?
I can't let Raj have the last word. There's zero correlation in the private sector.
This is an easy panel to do when you guys
Zero correlation between the number of bidders and the reducing total cost of ownership. In fact, if there's any trend whatsoever, it's the rationalization trend. Fewer, not more.
Great. There's a comment in the back, all the way in the back.
Yeah.
And then we'll take a couple more comments, and then we'll hear from the panel.
Thank you. I agree with all of you. I've just finished implementation, and nobody asked me how I acquired the system through an RFP process. So I empathize with everybody, and I was hoping to let Raj know, I think you should have another session to educate the procurement professionals on how to do an IT acquisition for a procurement solution, because I was my own client here. I usually procure for everybody, but since we acquired our ERP system and we had a provision in the contract through the Board of Supervisors that we will go enterprise solution and we're not going to piecemeal our HR, budget, procurement, and finance process, I utilized that to improve upon my enterprise solution even a decade later, and I was able to look at both on-premise and client solutions and be able to select the supplier. And when I was doing that particular engagement, I saw quite a few RFPs out in the marketplace, and Michigan, everybody, and they're written detailed requirements. And when I contacted our ERP vendor and asked them to give us some solutions, I brought 300 people of my customer base to come and talk to them in each aspect of the buying group, the customers, the suppliers, accounts payable staff. And the user experience for all of us was so painful that even procurement hated to do the purchasing function, right? So how did I, Santa Clara County, we also have regulations, be able to do this contract without a cumbersome process? No regulation says you have to write all your requirements. That's statement of objectives. NIGP is one of the sponsors here. They will teach you all those functions on how you could do. I have my largest contract is $700 million for pharmaceuticals. It's much easier than my $250,000 IT a SaaS solution. And everybody tries to fit in the requirements, and you evaluate like a low bid vendor, but call it best value. So the engagement, I saw a recent article that says an RFI. Let's use an RFI. Instead of request for information, request for interaction. So customer engagement, Jenny spoke about marketplace research. If Coupa is in San Mateo, and I was jumping up and down, I refused to go with my ERP vendor. I'm sorry, Ariba acquired SAP, so it's okay. But I did not want to do an 18-month implementation and have it customized by finance people. So I refused to touch the procurement piece of it. I was manual. But today I'm very happy. But all of these vendors, I value all of them. I don't want to name names because we are supposed to not say that. But all of them provide good solutions. How do we marry the government regulatory body to the nimbleness of technology is something that we have to look at NIGP or CAPO or any of these organizations and bring the vendors in to talk to us and engage the procurement professionals to learn how to do the requirements gathering in a way, not by writing step by step, because by the time I configured the sourcing module, I changed it the day I went live. And I did it myself without my IT people with me. If I had put that in my contract, I would have held my vendor accountable for not doing the right thing. So I empathize with the three of you there because it's hard to do business with the government. And we have to find a solution to get the best way. And how do we do that in this forum should be the next topics of discussion. Because when I talk to people, it's all theory. We've done it now, and I would never do an RFP for an e-procurement solution. And I'm a chief procurement officer for County of Santa Clara.
So let me just go and ask the panel, in terms of specific actions based on the comments, and we'll go back out to the audience afterwards, specific actions that government can take to marry technology to provide, as Raj says, effective competition that leads to better outcomes and better value, as opposed to sort of following a process model. Gary, you're here from the government, here to help, as was I for many years. Any thoughts on this?
Sure. Yeah, I think the tools are there, right? I think the tools are there today. The question is, how do you execute using the tool? So to very briefly go to the IT thing, the tool is there to allow us to do agile procurement for IT. The question is, are we ready to leverage the tool's capability and functionality to do agile, to successfully execute a contract that minimizes risk, that takes advantage of current practice in most IT industry companies and organizations, and to decide, to go to Jenny's point from earlier, what's the market? And to go to our colleague from Michigan's point about, Joe's point about, you need to know what the market is, and if you know what price is, then you probably don't need a complex solicitation. You probably need to just simply put out and say, we need this, and we want to know how much. You can bypass a lot of stuff. The rules don't necessarily say, urban legend, past practice. Mary taught me that before she retired 15 years ago, so that's how we do it today. All of that stuff gets in the way of fully understanding how you can maximize the use of a tool, both from a buy side, a sell side, right? So I'll pick on industry for 2 seconds as well. I have more reps come out of industry that do business with us on a regular basis, and when we say, here's what we're thinking about for the new opportunity, and they go, why are you changing it? I have the advantage, right? I used to be in industry. If you didn't change it and I was the winner before, I have the distinct advantage of winning again. And if you don't change it, to go back to competition and competition creating value and all of that stuff, if you don't change it, there are a whole bunch of companies that look at it and go, they're going to get it again. I'm not wasting $150,000, $200,000 to chase this deal. I'm out. I'm moving on. You won't see me for another 3 to 5 years because that's the term of the contract, and I'll peak then.
So other thoughts on actions government can take to help through this issue?
Yeah, I actually want to touch base on, I think, all the points, because they all come together to tell the story about where things are today. So the question about increased innovation, I wholeheartedly agree that really should be kind of the number one approach that the government takes when it looks for new technologies, because I think as we heard that, technology changes rapidly today, and a system that came out, say, 2 years ago might be outdated already today, or at least, it's gone through some changes. The biggest problem that I see with innovation is the reluctance to accept it. And I think, in fact, just in talking to people, Coupa is new to the federal marketplace. So in talking to prospective federal customers, one of the first questions they ask is, where are you, in the federal sector? So in other words, we want to try something that's already out there. I was actually at a meeting with a federal prospect yesterday, and he started asking about, just history. And I was looking more for the value of innovation and where we are today. And I made a comment and said, with that kind of attitude, you'd probably still be using typewriters. And he turned red and he said, we still use typewriters. So I think...
Hasn't yet graduated to COBOL, is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, there's still green screen technology out there and stuff. So, and I'm not picking on, it is what it is, but like I said, I think the mindset needs to change, that technology changes rapidly and innovation comes across rapidly, and that the governments need to be able to accept that. So that ties into the whole thing about the procurement that you brought up. How do we make that better? And I think what Gary said is absolutely true. All the tools and all the capability to do it rapidly and do it right are out there. It's just that we just kind of get saddled with the process, and hey, we're going to just look at the vendors that are under contract, and that's what I'm saying. You tie the pieces together about innovation and new products and new processes, and that's the thing, is that it's kind of a cyclical process. If you bring the new technology in, you can start to create new processes, and the whole thing gets speeded up. And then you tie that into total cost of ownership. You think about that for a second. Yes, you're going to invest in new technology, but I'll go back to my comment about typewriters. They might have spent a lot of money on word processing, when it first came out, but believe me, the cost savings as opposed to people typing with typewriters, I actually, dating myself here, but I remember I worked for a company where we had a typing pool. There literally were dozens and dozens of people in a room with typewriters typing all the time. Those don't exist anymore. And you think of, now people start to use their skills in a more advanced manner to help the organization to achieve their mission, not doing mundane tasks. So new technology helps that. I mean, you really need to be out of the business of procuring technology and let technology do the procurement for you. That's really what it's all about, because it's get what you need, get it at the right time, at the right price, so that you can execute your mission. Too much time and effort is spent on actually doing the procurement. And seriously, when you think about the money, I guarantee you, if there's federal people in the audience or online, you have been part of a procurement process that has cost your budget, meaning the taxpayers, millions of dollars to find a solution that you probably knew all along what the right one was, but you still had to go through the process to get there. So anyway, I think, Raj, this goes back to a comment. You could probably spend another whole day in this room with a whole new audience talking about how to change, procurement policies and procedures and how to advance the technology associated with that. So there is no rapid, answer to the question, but I think it's just we need to start changing the mindset.
So, Steve, you were working in the defense space. DoD's made a lot of effort to try to bring in innovation, setting up the IUX out in California. Are they looking at using technology to try to kind of spur the market along and create these kinds of opportunities?
Sure. And I think that's part of the problem. We need to think about how we wrap ourselves around technology instead of how we wrap technology around ourselves. And that'll be kind of the bumper sticker. And let me give you some tactics here. So latency, data, and rapid contracting. Latency, we have a huge latency problem. That's why every couple of years some senior government official comes out and says, oh, if only we were more innovative. My response is, well, you've actually stumbled into Clayton Christensen's innovator's dilemma, and you had the innovation, you just didn't keep the innovation. So all the data shows that companies that you do get, through conventional means or innovative means, the ones you do get, you give them the contract for $500,000, $1 million, $5 million, whatever. They perform on that contract, and then they drop you like a bad habit and go back to pitching Procter & Gamble, Aon, and Goldman Sachs for a number of other reasons. Which this is not an acquisition panel, so we can get into that later. So that is a primary problem. The innovation, the companies, the procurement tech that you all say you want, that we all agree we want, it's slipping through our hands. So it's less of an outreach problem, and it's more of like a hanging on problem. It's like I feel like it's a romantic comedy starring Tom Cruise and Meg Ryan or something, right? Like you just keep we keep missing each other.
Or I think it was Tom Hanks, actually.
Yeah, that would be kind of creepy now that I think about it. Anyway, so second, before I digress, so latency, that's the problem. Data, so here's a big idea. Typically, governments view data as an anchor around their neck, and that's assuming they even have access to the data that they say they want. The CAPE, Cost Assessment Program Office inside the Office of the Secretary of Defense, they literally cannot get program data from their providers. And their job is to analyze the data. So where does the data come from? You don't get augmented reality, you don't get virtual reality, you don't get big data, you don't get artificial intelligence without data. So, and this is not just me saying this, the National Geospatial, and there's a hyphen there, Intelligence Agency, NGA. Anyone here from NGA, by the way? Okay, cool. This is going to be an easier conversation. So NGA is launching a data fund modeled on the Linux Foundation because they said, you know what, if we go out there and we try to compete with who has the bigger wad of dollars, if that's our incentive to get commercial industry engaged, we're going to get blown out of the water. New Enterprise Associates, NEA, right, like the biggest venture capital fund in the world, also based here in DC, is on the 16th multi-billion-dollar fund. Like, they're good. So what they did realize is, what is the one thing in commercial industry that everyone desperately needs and no one can get? Data. Why does Google give you all those awesome services and products? Because they're freaking fire hosing your data, man. Like, they're sucking it all in, and they're cool. They'll do that. They'll give you free Gmail all 6 ways a Sunday. So NGA said, why don't we create a data fund? We throw off terabytes of data, and really the amount of data is almost inconsequential. They said, why don't we push out the data that we can, because they are an intelligence agency, push out the data that we can using a Linux Foundation model, right? Google that after you leave this event. A Linux Foundation model, and use that as the incentive and the carrot to get commercial industry involved. Use that as the incentive to create new products that we can use, and also, to be candid, help us productize our own internal R&D back out in the commercial sector. And then lastly, rapid contracting. There are multiple vehicles that I'm aware of, some on the smaller scale that are non-FAR based, not subject to DCA audits, not subject to cost controls. By the way, I would rather spend $500 million with 20% margin to a commercial provider than $1 billion at 6% margin. So if you like apples, how about those apples? A couple OTAs, other transaction authorities, technology investment agreements are two that fall under those categories. And then more at scale, GSA, right? The dude up here earlier from GSA. They have a thing called FedSim. Anyone familiar with FedSim? Yeah? Cool. So FedSim, like all-in-one business strategy, business development, contract operations. They'll literally put someone, actually depending on how much you pay them, multiple people in your office, and they'll do all of that stuff. You just focus on your technical requirements. And they can do that up to, I think, $1 billion, if not more. That's what, if you're familiar with Oasis, Oasis is a FedSim vehicle. So those are several like tactical things that, by the way, other people are doing. This is not something I read in like Fast Company, assuming they ever go that deep. This would be, this is stuff that your colleagues are doing right now.
Good. I know there were some other thoughts earlier. So up here, we'll try to move up the room.
Thank you, Bob Gleason. The other thing that we have a hard time getting are the people with the skills and the capabilities to operate some of the technology. And I've always been a little anxious to ensure that we don't necessarily commoditize the procurement process to the extent that we're not developing long-term, high-value relationships for those opportunities that are going to give us long-term benefits to the public body. If we don't have the skills and the competencies and the people that are operating this and thinking these things, because right now in the public sector it's very difficult, recruiting, retaining, training, and getting the people that have all of the capabilities to do all the things that we're talking about to do with all this amazing technology. And the tool is only so good as the people that are operating the tools and recognizing those opportunities, putting things together in sort of a complete thinking, critical thinking way. And that's just a problem across all the public sector. Tools are great, but if you're fishing, and if you've ever fished, you just can't throw a line in the water with any kind of bait at any time of the day or any time of the season and expect to catch a fish. You have to strategize, you have to prepare the market, or do your market analysis, prepare the suppliers to be responsive. There's a lot of upfront work, and you just can't throw a bid out there and expect to catch a good fish with a procurement process. So people, going back to that, operating the tools is one of the critical factors that we face.
Why don't we get a couple more thoughts from here, right up here, Jenny, and then we can go back there, and then we'll have the panel react.
Hi. So just to kind of respond to something Joe had said, you can research and go buy what you want from who you want to buy it from. In the public sector, we don't have that ability unless we are able to justify, I don't know, this microphone doesn't like me, justify a sole source, which in many cases this stuff isn't sole sources because there's a lot of people who can provide very similar. So, one way to address this issue, because if we have to do an RFP, on average, I think for most of us it takes about a year, build the requirements, figure out what you want, try to write it down, hope you did it okay, have the suppliers, you know the process. It's not good. So one way to address the issue is to look at cooperative procurement vehicles where the best of breed solutions are already on there that states and local governments can tap into and avoid the whole procurement process. So we're not buying something that's already outdated because it took us 18 months to do the procurement. So that's a solution that we have, and maybe a recommendation for the software providers is to, get on those NASPO value point and get on those cooperative contracts and then go out and sell to potential customers and say, we're on this contract. You can use this contract. Here's how we work. Because, from my perspective, not necessarily from an IT, but non-IT spend, I don't know that we're necessary. We can't just keep negotiating with the incumbents like you can in the private sector. And a lot of times those incumbents have really gotten complacent because they've been working with us for the past 10 or 15 or 20 years because we haven't gotten new blood in the door. So just an idea. And we say, people in government and really all of us say we want that Amazon-like experience, but then when it comes down to it, we really don't, because we want to customize everything to mirror how we do it today, because we won't break from the past, and we want to keep using the typewriter, but we say we don't. But then when it comes down to it, we really do. So, I'd say the cooperative contracts are kind of a vehicle and a tool to help with our speed to market for both the suppliers and buyers.
Interesting. And then one more. There was one back here still comment? Okay.
And this is kind of piggybacking off of Bob's comment, but there obviously is a role for e-procurement technology, and we need it desperately in the federal space to help us be more efficient. But I don't want us to lose sight of not just the skills that we need to instill in our procurement professionals to continue to improve the way we do business, but also the techniques we use to evaluate the competencies of our offerers throughout the procurement solicitation process. We've been moving more and more away from paper-based proposals as we really think about, I only want to get in writing from this company what I need to have in my contract. What I really want to do is engage with them and get in front of them and use oral presentations, technical demonstrations, product demonstrations. And as we move toward there, we need to have our e-procurement processes incorporate those capabilities and continue to help us be efficient while recognizing that paper pushing reviews and evaluations isn't the only way we're buying goods and services.
So collaborative vehicles, e-procurement that's dynamic and drive stuff, and then the people to be able to use those technologies. Interesting ideas. Closing thoughts from our panel before Raj takes us home.
So for folks who are trying to think about sort of how do I get there with the tools, a couple of things, and Raj touched on it earlier. I would strongly encourage people to add a transformation component to whatever vehicle it is that you're seeking, and do it as part of the solicitation, do it as part of the execution, whatever that execution is going to be based on your business need. I wouldn't underestimate the amount of time it takes to get to maturity with your tool. My general rule of thumb is it's 36 months before you really hit a mature state, no matter how much or how little of that tool you're using. And you'll see ramp up at that point, and then you'll see continued growth over a period of time until you plateau again. So don't get frustrated, I guess is really my point about if things aren't flying high in the first 6 months after you execute a tool. The other thing is, I would strongly encourage everyone, even if you have a tool, to start thinking about what's the next iteration going to look like. How many folks here actually have an Echo or a Google in home? Not many of you?
Yep.
Okay, so the reason why I bring this up is there's work underway already to take that voice recognition technology, to use that voice recognition technology to replace the screen and to replace the interaction that you have with your machine to do things. And it will probably be here sooner than later. And think about it from those of you who have the device now, you can say, I have a Dot, for example, Alexa, order me something. From a procurement perspective, that's what's coming. Not the let me find it in a catalog, although the underpinnings of the technology will have to have that data. But it's going to be things like Alexa, Combis, Pennsylvania, whatever it is, order me an onboarding kit for employee X and deliver to location 42. And that onboarding kit may be a tablet, a desk, a chair, a whole bunch of things. That's an order. That's a purchase order. That's going to go against some contract that's been established. That's not that far away. So for all of us still struggling with sort of standardization of catalog content, standardization of solicitations, whatever the case may be, using the tools, we really need to start to think about, because companies like my colleague here to my left and all the other companies out there are already thinking about what's our next big thing, what's our next world. And if you're a customer, you may get some insights off the roadmap. If you're not a customer, start to think about how that, back to transformation, how that's going to affect your workforce. Because to go back to the typewriter e-procurement system, now we're going to go from e-procurement system to voice activation, ordering, and pick these 17 terms out of my terms and conditions library to put into this solicitation to go out in the street. People are going to go, I love that. I don't have to do anything except for talk. And then when that comes in a few years and it's in front of people, it's going to be the same thing. Just let me keep my keyboard. I'm not sure it really understands me. So,
Andy?
So I had to chuckle, Gary, because a lot of things you just talked about. Are we on? Yeah.
Yep.
A lot of things that we talked about are actually in process right now. So not just with us, but I know with other technology companies out there. But I want to address 2 points that were raised. I think Polly was the last one to say something about the skill sets that are involved here and everything. So think about having a tool, and whether it's voice activated or whatever, but having a tool that allows people to stop relying upon mundane administrative tasks, and they're starting to work more on strategic tasks within the organization. And that ties back to Bob, your comment about how do you attract and maintain people in the environment so that you have that effective use of those tools and you be able to get that value out of it. I tell a story, and a true story. I was sitting across the desk from a CIO, and we were talking about implementation of a new system, and he said, well, right now I'm currently using System X. I won't use the vendor name. And he said, I have 24 people on my staff that all they do is maintain the customization for that system. He goes, if we bring your system in, what am I going to do with those people? Well, that's where you want to kind of reach across the table and give them a little bit of a wake-up tap there. And I said to him, I guarantee you those 24 people are tired of maintaining those customizations, and they would rather do something a little more exciting. At the end of the day, they made the decision to move to the new system, and those people are, better deployed, and that's value. That's part of the total cost of ownership, that now all of a sudden you have people that are much more productive in doing things to help the mission of the organization. So I think new technology, new tools is attractive to people. They don't want to go into an organization that uses green screen technology or typewriters or whatever, the old technology might be. They want that new technology because that's what they're used to, and they're used to seeing it change dramatically. The other thing, in terms of, is it Jenny? You talked about the, just the procurement process itself. So what we're seeing in the commercial world is we don't really see RFPs. We'll get a call, or we'll get some sort of connection with somebody that'll say, come in and talk to us. So you come in and talk, you do a demo, you do a presentation. They do that with all the other vendors they're looking at. At the end of the day, they'll pick one or two, have you come back in, do a little more fine tuning. They make a decision. They've saved time, they've saved money, they've looked at everything that's out there, and they picked the right product. There is a little bit, you have to have that kind of a trust me attitude that, everybody has the joke about, that was the demo system type of thing. But the reality is that, everybody's going to show you their demo system. But talk to the customers. And I think that's one thing that I hope that we see more and more in the public sector is reach back to customers and find out what successes they're having. Because demos are one thing, but to have someone stand up to the plate and say, this is the value we've received, I think that's much more powerful.
Good. Steve, last word?
Yeah, I would just piggyback off that and say that agile development's important. I mean, that was in full display with the Obamacare rollout. They picked a large federal contractor that then did the classic long lead time build up without any kind of iteration. Software had never been tested, and it fell over on its face. So now that's why you now have things like the U.S. Digital Service and a host of other organizations that are designed to help the federal government. I think if you're here from state and local, I believe you actually have a leadership function to show your colleagues in the federal government a way forward, because you have the opportunity to show how this stuff plays out, whatever that stuff is, at a smaller scale. It's one thing to talk about technology. At the outside, I talked about time, economics and risk, right? It's one thing to talk about that in a small company or even a mid-sized company or a local government. It's an entirely different one to talk about spreading that across an entire enterprise, right? And that's tough. And candidly, there's huge downside risk to any of us attempting that. Like that, we have to kind of go into that eyes wide open, which is why you try agile software development as one example to pull that off. Otherwise, it's too difficult. And I would say that one actually federal government organization that's doing what you were just talking about is PEO STRI down in Orlando. Program Executive Office for simulation, training, and instrumentation, right? So they do all the modeling, simulation, and gaming for the U.S. Army. So they did exactly that. Had a couple vendors, or had a bunch of people respond to an RFI, which, by the way, you are allowed to talk to the government up until RFP. So whoever said RFI should stand for request for engagement, I think, something like that, or request for interaction. Yeah, that's the point. You're supposed to be able to talk to the government, within reason, and tell them what you need, what you think it should look like, up until the point the RFP hits, and then you're going to get blown out of the water by one of the major contractors anyway, so you have no worries.
All right. Well, please join me in thanking our panel. Thanks to all of you for some great questions and discussions, and let me turn it back over to Raj.
All right. Well, we're right up on time, against time here, 5 minutes to go. So I'm just going to open it up. We had a session planned, but I think we got some of that kind of discussion around next steps. How do you go to market? And we'll do something, probably 1-2 hour forum online at some point soon, and get more in depth on that and get some more advice. But I just wanted to ask, if anybody wants to just kind of chime in, just very quick, 30 seconds to 1 minute max, on comment on what are your key takeaway, any advice points?
Tying a lot of things together. I'm Alan Monaco from Treasury.
Great.
Alan Monaco from Treasury. Just want to tie a few things together. So I guess the biggest point I would make is government is really, really bad at articulating its requirements. So to Genti's point, okay, about leveraging the SUE, the FAR gives us that ability, and we really
statement of objectives.
The statement of objectives, right?
Yeah.
So that a statement of work will become of that in the process. Okay, so we don't do a good job in leveraging that. Most of the panel asked the question: how do we marry up tools with bodies that need them? Well, it's because the bodies that need them can't articulate the requirements the right way. So if we can cut layers out of that process by leveraging the SUE, that would be probably the biggest single thing that they can do to improve their results.
That's great advice. And I actually, you'll see a follow-up that has some similar advice coming from us. Yes. Any other? So Jason and Pierre, why don't you guys, you go to a lot of these forums and you run a lot of procurement technology forums. So tell us what's your advice as takeaways and advice as a closing.
Absolutely. I'll go fast. Just 2 quick points. One is, it's so easy to do basic disruptive things today through technology, whether it's e-procurement, whether it's strategic sourcing or contract management. It shouldn't be a massive barrier. You can also do amazing things via disruptive technology, and the GSA blockchain story is pretty unbelievable. I haven't seen examples of that in private sector really out of beta yet in procurement and supply chain. So just because we're in this for the public good and it's public sector doesn't mean we can't lead in terms of disruption as well.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there is a lot of innovation. Part of it is just capturing that and sharing it in forums like this. I think are terrific. I mean, there was just kind of one thing I guess I would say is there's a lot of themes about really rethinking the processes of procurement itself. There's a lot of great discussion on rethinking the technologies and the solutions, and it's beyond just tech apps. And probably I'll maybe disagree with Andy a little bit, but it's just a tool. When the tools become transformational by going beyond traditional tools and they start to bring in big data and new insights, it becomes transformational if you know how to use it. And I think that's going to be the real interesting convergence now is, can procurement really heal itself and really apply these best practices to how it buys procurement? Because in this case, you own the budget if you have the budget, but it's really, you are the stakeholder. So there's really should be no but you should really be able to use these tools to transform yourself, and in doing that, that's huge, because then you can really bring that to the rest of the organization. So I think I'm just really privileged to see some really great stuff here in this room, and I thought it was terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. I just want to say a couple of things really quick to close this out. First of all, great discussion, and thank you I know it can get long really quick, so thank you for sticking around, and we do have a reception. So, but a couple of takeaways. One, I think the point about disruption and leapfrogging beyond kind of incremental change is an important one. And I think the blockchain example is a good one, right? And one of the things we see in government a lot is around just process reform, process changes, policy reform, all of those changes. Technology is really offering a way to leapfrog all of that and get beyond those basic incremental changes. And I think the point that was also made about, the workforce benefiting and embracing that, while they may be a little afraid, but they're also looking for that. And that's a way for us to really change things in a bigger way. So that's what I would encourage everyone here, is partly we took this forum on, and this is just the start of the dialogue, is we believe that technology can really be disruptive for the procurement process. So we all stop complaining about it, and we actually can one day come back, my hope is, and say, wow, we love the government procurement process. Now, isn't that aspirational? And thank you. We will be releasing a report today on the vendor landscape. Spend Matters has helped us, and we're working jointly, as we said earlier. And so please check out our site, tell others, and please just stay engaged in the dialogue. Thank you so much.